Welcome to my cozy little corner. Today I want to talk about my favorite books of the year so far. I've read some really good books and I am ready to talk about them. I've been kind of slacking on my YouTube, but we're back, we're here, we're back to regular scheduled programming. So before we get into this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Look out for some fun vlogs because now that I have a car again, I have some really fun vlogs planned. And let's just get into this. I am really channeling my fall. God, I'm so ready for it to be fall time. Look at my little mushroom mug. And I got my little fall rain in the back, and it's very gloomy, so such a vibe. Very happy. This cup is very hot because I microwaved it. So I got my handy dandy notebook to help me out. So I've read a lot of books this year, and I forgot to look. I'm going to put up here how many books I've read so far. The only reason why I've read so many is because I listen to books while I'm at work, but I also read books physically at home. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't really have a lot of other hobbies, so I'm just able to get through a lot of books because A, I'm doing it on my clock, or on the clock, but B, I also like to read on my Kindle at night. It's the only way I can get to sleep. That is my spiel for why I read so much. But anyways, I'm going to do this in order of when I've read them because that's the order I wrote them when I was on Goodreads. I have 16 here to talk about. To be honest, I could have talked about more, but this video is probably going to be long enough already. So grab a beverage, grab a blanket, get cozy, join my little cozy corner, and let's just stop procrastinating. So, the first book was Homeseeking. I've talked about this book before, but I loved this book. This book is about a couple, sorta. It's about a couple. The man's perspective is backwards, and the female's perspective is chronological. And it is historical, and it's set, I forget the country. Again, I've read a lot of books, so the exact details of the books can sometimes get fuzzy, but I always remember how the books made me feel. I do remember it being historical, and I remember it being, I know it's an Asian country, but the story starts where they're in California years later, and you're following the man character, the MMC character, and he is kind of reminiscing and kind of thinking about the events that led him to where he is now. And he is an elderly man, and he stumbles upon the FMC in a grocery store one day, and he's like, I have not seen you in years. So they reconnect, and you get their story in a very interesting non-linear way. Like I said, you get the man's story backwards, and then you get the female's perspective forwards, and the book kind of ends where they kind of come together. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I think that if you like Stationery Shop, which I believe is on this list, you should definitely read this book. I think that Stationery Shop's a little bit more popular and a little bit more book talk popular, but this book definitely deserves to be up there. It hit me like a truck. Okay, I cried while I was at work. I really love this book. Homeseeking. Number 2, Hamnet. I have what is called hateritis, unfortunately. When a book becomes too popular, I ignore it until I cannot ignore it anymore. And the movie came out, and I really wanted to watch the movie, and I was like, you know what? It's time to finally read this book. And I loved it. If for some reason you don't know what Hamnet is, it follows Shakespeare's wife and family, but not using his name. So they just say a playwright, because really, I'd say that this story is focused on Agnes, his wife. It's a beautiful story about grief. It's Maggie O'Farrell at her peak, in my opinion. I just love the way she writes historical fiction, and I immediately understood why it had the hype around it that it did. I plan on eventually watching the movie. I've been procrastinating that as well. And I think it's because I know the emotional impact that the story is going to have on me. So I'm waiting until a day that I can handle that. But I love it. It has definitely made its way into my favorite books of all time for sure. The prose. I don't typically annotate books. Like as I'm reading them the first time, I like to annotate on the second read because I like to get the story like on its surface before I try to focus on deeper things. And I couldn't do that with this book. I actually annotated on the first try or the first read, which is not something that I do very often. It's just an absolutely phenomenally beautiful book. The next book is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. This is a story about a small town black sheriff who's essentially looking for a serial killer. And I don't really want to tell you anything else. This book single handedly reminded me that thrillers can be written well. Thrillers can make you invested in your characters. Thrillers can have like a little bit of a lit fic lean to them with still having such an engaging story. This book is written like a movie, okay? And also, it does have some scenes that are not the easiest to read, but it's just so good. If my angles are changing, it's because I'm having technical difficulties left and right. My camera keeps dying, my mic keeps dying. We might actually only film half of this today and half of this next week because I'm about to have to repeat myself, but it's okay. Life goes on. Let's talk about Vanishing Half. The Vanishing Half is a story about two sisters who whose father was lynched. And sorry for that. But he was. And it's a story about trauma and how trauma can manifest itself in multiple different ways. We have a story about two women of color who decide to take two very different paths in life because of the trauma that they experienced when they were younger. So one sister decides to move out the town and pass. The other sister moves out of the town, finds a man, has a baby. That baby turns out to be very, very dark skinned. And then she comes back to the town. And the town doesn't really take kindly to darker skinned people. And it's kind of multi-generational in a way. It's like one generation, I'd say. You follow both the kids by the end of the story of both of the sisters. So you're seeing not only how the trauma has affected both sisters, but you're also seeing how the trauma has affected both children and both families. It is kind of like In Conversation with Passing by Nella Larson, which I decided to read prior to it, but you don't have to. I just thought it would be kind of interesting to have a little bit of a prerequisite, I guess, a little bit of, because it's like I said, it's kind of in conversation with it. I Passing is essentially like a 1920 story about the exact same thing, but it's on a smaller scale. One character passes, one character does not, and it's just about passing and not passing and why and the consequences and so on and so forth. And this is like a modern, deeper take on that story. I just really loved it. I loved the prose. I loved what it was saying. And it's a story that by the end of it, it took a lot of different plot turns that I wasn't expecting. With certain characters, like I'm just gonna kind of put it out there, but there's a trans side character that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the direction that that story took. It wasn't anything big, but it was just a little side character moment that I really enjoyed. But yeah, that was The Vanishing Half. Next, let's talk about Ascendant. I have not been reading very much fantasy this year. I'd say that like some years I have heavier fantasy years than others. Last year was a very heavy fantasy year for me, but this year I'm finding that, like, to be honest with you, I read a lot of my fantasy in the Burr months. So like October, November, December, and then a little bit in January. Fantasy's like cozy season to me, and obviously we have not hit those months yet, so I haven't really read any fantasy, but I did pick up Ascendant, which Ascendant is your classic boy with the dragon, okay? It's Dragon Rider fantasy, it's Aragon for adults. It is every fantasy trope that you know and love done in a new, modern, cozy, fun way. Okay, I just love this series. I love the dragons in this series. I have spoken about these dragons so many times, okay? I love when Dragon Rider Fantasy makes the dragons have personalities and personalities that I love. And there's multiple dragons with personalities, right? Like, you're not just getting the personality of the main dragon, you're also getting, there's another character, because the very first book, Ascendant, is one POV essentially through the whole entire thing. Once you get to the second and third, which I know I'm talking about the first book right now, but like, bear with me, you start to get more POVs. And there are other dragons, and you get to get those dragons. And also, the dragon politics in this series is so cool. I will say I never got super far into Aragon, so I can't speak if it's like similar, but I really love the dragon lore and the dragon politics in this series, as if it's like it's like a subsect of people, but they're dragons. I don't know. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think that if you want a cozy time that isn't low stakes, I think that you would like it. I mentioned this prior, but let's talk about Stationery Shop. Stationery Shop is about a boy and a girl, and they meet in a stationery shop. They fall in love fairly quickly, and then the political turmoil at the time, I believe it's in Tehran, but I cannot remember the exact dates, like the exact decades that it's in. I read a lot of books, so details, they go in one ear and out the other. But I remember how the books make me feel. So, anyways, they meet each other, and then political turmoil ensues, and they are separated. And you do learn that they don't end up together at the end. You learn that pretty early, and it's a story about what happens, right? It's just a story about meeting the right person, and then through events that are not your fault, you don't end up with that person, and then it kind of gives you that final meaning and what that means. And you learn pretty early on, first chapter, that that is going to happen. I'm pretty sure that's even on the back of the book, so it's not spoiling or anything. It tells you in the beginning that they get to see each other for one last time, but they're older. And then it tells you the story of how that happened, because you learn pretty quickly that they fall in love, and it seems like things are going to be easy, but then it goes through what happens to make that not very easy. This book had me crying in the club, let me tell you. Okay, I was working, I was crying. I do that way too often, unfortunately. This book is beautiful. It gives me Notebook vibes. I feel like if you've seen Notebook or read Notebook, the Notebook, and you heard the synopsis of the stationery shop, you would put two and two together why I'm saying that. I feel like they kind of are very similar, but it's its own thing. But I think if you like the one, you will definitely like the other. I just thought the story was very beautiful, and I'm really into romance stories, like historical fiction with romance subplots, is what I'm trying to say. I'm super into that. It's my favorite way to consume romances, because I'm just kind of over contemporary romances right now. I sprinkle them in here and there, but I'm just not super into them. And this is my way of getting romance. I like to not know if they're going to end up together. Okay? I like to not know. Next, I think this is another example of what I just said, but A Thousand Splendid Suns. This is another book that had me crying in the club, okay? This is about two women. I think it's Iran. I get a lot of these Middle Eastern countries mixed up. It's probably not a good thing. A Thousand Splendid Suns is a book about two women who married the same man decades apart. I think it's a decade apart. And you're following the first woman and her, and then her meeting that husband and getting married. Then you follow the second woman. You meet that woman, you follow that woman until she marries the man, and then you kind of follow this makeshift family and what comes of it. It's a very harrowing story, but I love a story that is like I said, harrowing, but then ends in a hopeful way. I loved, like, this book tore my heart into a million pieces, but then like taped it all back together for me by the end of it. It was very cathartic, I think is the word. Yeah, if you want a good cry and you like historical fiction, I highly recommend A Thousand Splendid Suns. Next, we have Island of Missing Trees. You can tell because, like I said, I am doing it in order of when I read these because that's how I wrote them on my Goodreads. And you can tell I went through a little bit of a phase there. I was reading a ton of historical fiction with romantic subplots, and I definitely would say that this is one of them. This has one of the most interesting POVs I have ever read in my entire life. Okay, Island of Missing Trees is about two star-crossed lovers in Cyprus. I think it's 1970s Cyprus. So this story follows multiple different perspectives and multiple different timelines. So you start following this little girl, and I think she's a teenager. I don't really think she's little. Okay, and you find out that her mother has passed away and she's dealing with the trauma of her mother while she's also trying to deal with the connection with her dad because obviously he's grieving as well. And I think it's her aunt. Her aunt comes and she's never met any part of her family ever. So she's reconnecting or connecting with her aunt. And then when she's talking to her aunt is giving the story of Cyprus and the civil war that was going on in Cyprus. And so you go back a little bit to 1970 Cyprus and you learn about these two star-crossed lovers and you learn what happened. And it gives you a lot of historical context of the civil war that I had no idea that was happening. It's the Greeks and the Turks, I believe. And yeah, it is a literal like star-crossed lovers story set in 1970 Cyprus. It has the most interesting POV because one of the POVs that is both timelines is a fig tree. It is a fig tree. This brought nature into the story in such an interesting way. And I love this darn fig tree. Okay, I loved the voice for the audiobook, the way he told the story. He added so much pizzazz to the story and it's just a beautifully written story. And I think that if you like historical fiction with a romance subplot in any capacity, you need to read Island of Missing Trees. Gorgeous. Lovely. Tear-jerking. Next we have my first Kristen Hanna. So obviously, since I was on my journey of historical fiction with a romantic subplot, I had to try Kristen Hanna. There's no escaping her. I'm trying to set my notebook down. There's no escaping her on TikTok. Okay, there is no escaping her really in any book space. She's extremely popular, especially in the historical fiction book space. So I read Great Alone. This book is me on paper, okay? This is about a young girl who it's her mother, and her father. Her father is a very traumatized Vietnam vet, and his trauma manifests in him being a very abusive father. They decide they're always running from predators and all of that jazz, and so they end up going to Alaska. They end up trying to live off the land and move to rural Alaska and live off the land. And that's where our story kind of starts. And so this is a story about this young girl coming of age living in rural Alaska. I love books where the nature is like a character. And Alaska was a character in itself. Alaska and the dangers of Alaska, like it was both beautiful and dangerous and terrifying at the same time. I cried so hard. The romance subplot in this story was beautiful, and the trope, I don't really like that word, but the trope that was the romance, I don't want to give it away, is one of my favorite tropes. Okay, it's one of my favorite tropes when it comes to romance, specifically in like well written romance. So needless to say, needs to say that I don't know what that saying is. All of that to say, This book was definitely meant for me on paper, and the execution was perfect. Now, I did go on to read The Women, which I know this is all about the books I loved, but I just want to put out there, because I loved The Great Alone so much, I immediately went into The Women and I hated it. That is a different story for a different day. But if anybody has Kristen Hanna recommendations that feel closer to The Great Alone and farther away from The Women, let me know. Because I was obsessed with The Great Alone and hated The Women. Frankie was insufferable, and her trauma dump was crazy in the last third. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Next, let's talk about, what did I read after that I liked? Oh, This Tender Land. This book. So you'll notice that I went on a bit. So after my historical fiction romance subplot kick, this is just giving you guys like a little bit into my brain of like the trajectory of my brain. I love a hyperfixation on a genre. So after my hyperfixation on historical fiction with a romance subplot, I hyperfixated on nature focused books, like fiction that's like nature focused. And so I read This Tender Land. This is an Odyssey retelling, very timely. But it's about two boys and a girl. I think it's two, might be three boys and a girl. And they run away from a Native American reform school. So one of the boys is Native American, but the two other boys are white. And that's kind of important, I would say, to the story. But they run away from this Native American reform school after like a crime's committed. And they literally hop into a boat on the Mississippi River. And it takes them on this very Odyssey like quests or destination travel type story. They meet a large cast of characters on the way, and this, ooh, honestly, I'm speechless. I loved the way this book made me feel. This has book, I, I don't know if it's 2 or 3. I think I need to redo my top 10 books of all time because I do think it's changed, but this is definitely up there somewhere. I loved the nature in this book. I loved the storytelling in this book, but I also loved the way that this book kind of talked about childhood. Like, it's these children going about their little journey, trying to get to a certain place while also running away from all of this chaos. And it really captured childhood in a weird way. I don't know. I just, like I said, the nature writing was gorgeous. It was very kooky in a way too. Like, it had this little bit of like whimsicalness where it was like, is this fantasy? Is this magical realism? Is it kind of like in your head? Or like, are you supposed to not know? Like that type of vibe. And I ate it up. I definitely want to read it again. I think next year, I like to save my rereads, obviously, for at least a year apart. So I'll probably reread that again in the summer and annotate the shit out of it because boy, did I love that book. Okay, next I have to talk about normal people. And actually, I need to give you my normal people spiel. If you see my last video, which I'll link below, I already gave my normal people spiel, but I'm going to give it again. Let me set the scene, okay? I was not having a good mental health day, all right? All I wanted to do was lay in the bed and cry. So I wanted to watch a very emotional, I wanted to watch hours upon hours of TV. So I was laying in bed and I was like, what mini slash limited series can I binge that will make me be in my feels so hard that I will forget what is happening mentally and happening in my own life, and I can disappear into their issues and their trauma. And I was like, girl, normal people. I have, if I haven't already talked about it, and I probably have, I have hateritis, like I said, and when a book becomes super popular, I want to avoid it like the plague. And I normal people was probably the beginning of that thing, okay? The beginning of my hateritis. And so I avoided it like the plague. But everyone told me that, Janae, this is gonna be your favorite book. You are gonna be obsessed with this book. And so I decided to commit the cardinal sin and go ahead and
watch the show before I read the book. So I watched the show. I cry like a goddamn baby at the last scene. And then I immediately finish the show, go to Barnes & Noble, buy a physical copy, come home. I read the whole book in like 24 hours. And then I proceeded to cry again like a baby at the end of the book. I love Normal People. If you don't know what Normal People is, I don't really know very many people who don't, but Normal People is about Marianne and Connell, and it is following their very long, tumultuous love life. You meet them when they're in high school, and they spark up a relationship in high school, and then there's a bunch of different time jumps. It's very much like right person, but never the right time. And that's the entire story. I'd say that Normal People, in my opinion, it's not about the romance. You root for the romance, maybe. But they're two people who aren't really the greatest people in the world, I will say that. And it's so much more. It's about anxiety. It's about trauma. It's about what trauma can manifest into when it comes to relationships. It is one giant book about miscommunication, but it's so beautiful. And it's about like classism. It's about like two people being like in different social classes and what that can mean in a relationship. Like this Sally Rooney did her thing, and I completely understand why people are so obsessed with it. I also understand why this book is so hit or miss. This book is like either you love this book down or you hate this book down. I happen to fall into the category of loving this book down. I love a complicated character, okay? I do not need to like a character to enjoy a book. I actually feel like I enjoy books more when I don't agree with the character, but specifically when I do not agree with the character, but when an author writes the character in a way that I understand the train of thought that they go through to get from point A to point B, even though I might not agree. I love Normal People. So my spiel basically about Normal People is that I watched the show first, immediately read the book. I thought that both were amazing in their own rights. And moral of the story is I need to stop putting off things, but it's just not gonna happen, is it? Cue Piranesi in a corner yelling at me to read it. Yeah, I don't know, it's just not gonna happen. So we're getting towards the end. We have 5 more books to talk about. Boy, can I yap when I have caffeine in me. But next, speaking of characters that I don't agree with, but I understand, My Dark Vanessa. This book is so hard to read. If you've ever wanted to read the book, check this check the trigger warnings in every single shape of the word, okay? You got 2 timelines. First timeline, 15-year-old girl dating her English teacher. Second timeline, years later, same English teacher gets accused of doing it to a different girl, and it sparks a lot of stuff in Vanessa's life. And Vanessa is now forced to rethink about the events when she dated this English teacher. This is a story that's like in conversation with Lolita. I think the way that this story took Lolita and really like flipped it on its head and like really talked about how traumatizing, I guess, Lolita could be, or like how in the wrong hands of people who misunderstand it, how dangerous Lolita can be. I loved this story because I loved Vanessa. I love, like I said, following the character who just like I don't agree with. But the author of this story did such a phenomenal job of writing her thought process and her trauma of dating this English teacher really manifested in how her life turned out to be. And she thinks about the situation in a different way, which I really appreciated. She does not see herself as a victim, and so you really see her work through that mentality, and you just watch her go through mentally and rehash the events of when she was in high school and everything that ensued because of it. It is just such a phenomenal book and such a feat. But it's not the easiest to read, and I really think if you could handle it, because I will say, like, there are very intimate scenes with this 15-year-old girl and this English teacher. Like, it goes in detail. But I will say, like, it doesn't go in detail.
The technical difficulties just keep happening. I hope my audio was better. Unfortunately, I don't remember what I was talking about, but I think I left off on my Dark Vanessa. Um, to wrap up my thoughts, I just love a story. Like I said, I love a story that is about a very complicated character, but I understand the train of thought and the process and all of that when it comes to that very complicated character. So next we'll go into like the last three books. I think three, four. The last four books are all summerween leaning books. So July, I said summerween, correct. So I'm celebrating summerween all of July. It's currently about to be August. My brain said I'm not done. So I think August is also going to be summerween, which is my birthday month. I think I'm going to reread it, which is besides the point. But like, all this to say is, I think from here on out, it's going to be the true Janae reader is defrosting, and I get to finally have my autumnal reads. So we'll start with I Was a Teenage Slasher. This book was so good. So good. I love Stephen Graham Jones. Stephen Graham Jones is the reason that I am no longer a certified horror hater. I actually think I'm part of the girls now. I'm part of the horror girls now. Who am I? For context, I read The Only Good Indians and I was so obsessed. It's horror, okay? It's horror to the max. It's not like a thriller or no, it's horror. It's a revenge story. It's got an entity in it that's getting revenge on a bunch of people. And Stephen Graham Jones' ability to write horrifying things, but also kind of give it a literary lean. Like, again, same thing that I was saying about thrillers. It made me appreciate the characters. I got a little bit more deeper with the characters than I read in some past horror books. So, I read I Was a Teenage Slasher as my first summerween read. And this book, I don't even know how to explain it. So it is about a boy who he's reflecting on being a slasher. He is reflecting, he is telling you the story of a summer that he killed multiple people. And he's explaining how he became a slasher and how he got there. Now, what is so amazing about this book is it turns being a slasher into being like a magical creature or like it makes being a slasher like a werewolf or a vampire. Like there's rules that being a slasher has to follow. There's the trajectory of events has to happen a certain way because that's what happens as a slasher. There's like a cycle almost. And you're following this boy who turned into a slasher during the summertime, and it's one summer, it's like 4 days, and so you're just following the 4 days of him becoming a slasher and like what that like kind of entails. I didn't want to put this down. I actually read this book in less than 24 hours. The audio book is so phenomenal. I immersion read it. Like I said, I'm just in love with Stephen Graham Jones's writing. I think like you're either Stephen Graham Jones girly or you're not. So if you've read another one of his books and you didn't really vibe with it, I think he's pretty consistent with how he writes, but I love how he writes. I love Dutchmen. I mean, it's slasher. Okay, it's a slasher with like a different twist on it. It's all the best horror tropes, like slasher tropes, but like kind of flipped on its head, done in a different way, and I just really enjoyed it. And it's super perfect for summerween if you want a summerween vibe, which I think a lot of people are kind of exiting. But if you're like a permanent summerween enjoyer, like me, I guess, up until actual fall comes, it's a really good book that's like got a summerween vibe. Next, I'm so excited to talk about this book. Mary by Nat Cassidy. It was a very big surprise for me. So, long story short, I was planning on reading When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy. And I was planning on reading that for Summerween. I felt like it had a little bit more of a Summerween vibe to it. I think I was wrong. I think Mary is actually a little bit more Summerween because heat has a lot to do with Mary. But anyways, my point is, I was going to read When the Wolf Comes Home. And then Mary was available and that one wasn't. And I cannot tell you what that voice in my head was, but something was whispering, you are going to be obsessed with this book. You need to read this book. I really think you're going to like this book. And I decided to listen to the little voice in my head, which I don't do often. And she was correct. Okay. Mary is about a 49, about to turn 50-year-old woman. She loses her job. She lives in New York. Her rent is going up. She's very down on her luck, older woman who's also going through menopause. And she's experiencing a lot of crazy things that she just cannot explain. And so she's going to doctors and all these different things, and they're all telling her like, and they're male doctors, of course, and they're all basically telling her like all of these symptoms are textbook menopause. Okay, like nothing's wrong with you, whatever. Even though her symptoms are like way crazier than like typical menopause symptoms, they're just not listening to this lady at all. So one day she gets a call from her aunt, who she does not like, and her aunt is like, "Hi, I'm dying and I need someone to take care of me." She doesn't want to go back to her hometown, which is Arizona, and she has to though because her aunt's like, "I'll pay you if you come down here, take care of me. I'll pay you." And she's like, "Fine, I need the money. I'm fired from my job anyway." So she goes. She goes to this town. She gets to this town, and just weird shit starts happening to her. Like her symptoms that were already happening are now exacerbated, and she's seeing like women's faces start to look crazy when she looks at them. She doesn't like mirrors for a reason I'm not going to get into. She's seeing like almost ghosts around the town who have like bags basically over her, over their heads. And the whole book is you just trying to figure out what the insert word here is going on in her head. Like, is it in her head? Is she going crazy? Is something happening in this town? Because it's a weird town. And also, I was extremely skeptical about reading a book where the main character is a 49 about to be 50-year-old woman going through menopause, and that's like the whole point is that she's not being taken seriously because they all are like, it's menopause, just discrediting this woman, this older woman. And I was really afraid that this man was not going to be able to write this story properly or like give it the love and attention that it deserves. Then I read the author's note at the end. So there's an author's note in the beginning, and then there's an author's note at the end. And please do not skip the author's note because the author's note, to me, made the book 10 times better. It also made me love Nat Cassidy. The way he handled the subject matter of writing a character like this, I was floored. I was floored. He really put love and attention into this chosen character. But I loved it. It's definitely horror. Okay. It's horror. There's some scary parts, there's some gory parts, but it's well worth it for what this man does for Mary. And also I found the ending so satisfying. Like insanely satisfying. I read this recently and it might be recency bias, but I can't stop thinking about this book. Last two books we have are both Southern Gothic. So I am deep in a Southern Gothic hole right now. I'm either reading Southern Gothic or I'm reading paranormal romance from the early 2000s. Weird mixture we got going on, let me tell you, but I'm living my best life. But let's start with Reformatory because I read that first. Reformatory was like the next book I read in my like summerween little vibe I had going on, and this is a story about a boy who Jim Crow South, he commits a crime that's not really a crime. And he gets thrown into a reform school and he can see ghosts. And when he gets to this reform school, he starts to see ghosts and haints. They call them haints. Anyways, he goes to this reform school, and through seeing these ghosts and talking to these ghosts and a lot of other stuff, he starts to discover the true nature of this reform school. And then we also have the POV of his sister, who is like the quintessential older sister, you know, like the quintessential oldest child, oldest daughter, you know, that one. She goes and she is doing everything in her power to get her brother out of this reform school because she knows that he does not deserve to be there, and she also knows how that place is quite literally hell on earth. So that's what you're following. You're following the sister trying to get him out, and then you're following him going through it. This is such a hard book to read. Like I said before, I clearly like very emotional books. Check your trigger warnings and prepare to be absolutely pissed off the entire time you read this book. Not because the book is bad, but because she writes it so historically accurate. One word, if you've read this book, funhouse. Yeah, terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Part of what, my opinion, makes this book so good is it is horror, but the horror is not the ghost. The horror is the fact that human beings can treat other human beings so awfully. Oh Lord, it's hard to read, but it's worth the read. Phenomenal, and it really threw me into a Southern Gothic kick. Finally, let's talk about Ring Shout before my camera dies again. Ring Shout is a very short novella that is about this like movie that basically kind of sent out magic in this alternate history, like America, and it turned it turned a bunch of KKK members into literal demons. And so in the story, you are following a woman resisting group fighting these demonized KKK members. Um, and I think that's all you need to know. I It's so short that knowing anything else will ruin it. This author, I need to read more. I'm usually never connected to characters in novellas because they're just so short. But I was invested, I was connected. I want an entire animated show in this world. Give it to me tomorrow, please. Yeah, that's really all I'm gonna say about Ring Shout. I think it's amazing. I think a great comp for it is if you liked Sinners. Yeah, I think like when Sinners came out, this book is older than Sinners, and when Sinners came out, a lot of people were saying if you like Sinners, you need to read this. What this author was able to do in such a short period of time, like my only complaint is just I need more. But yeah, that was Ring Shout. Thank you for making it to the end and hanging out with me and talking about books. I have some really fun like vlogs planned. I'm really inspired right now. Now that I have a car again, I'm really inspired, and I have some plans for my vlogs. But I also have some sit down videos planned too, so I can get back on my YouTube shit. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.